also known as Haji Abdullah, a senior administration official saying as American service members moved in, he exploded a bomb, killing himself and members of his own family. You can see the podium there set up at the White House, the Roosevelt Room. That's the target and some of the aftermath that we've seen in northwest Syria, Idlib province, where in recent days ISIS was to have said to be reconstituting and resurging this leader. And the target had been planned for several months. Incredibly complex, 24 Special Forces operations officers. We want to get to NBC's chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, with the very latest from the White House. Peter, as we await the president's remarks.
Yes, Savannah, that's right. The president expected to enter the Roosevelt Room moments from now, detailing what the White House is describing as a successful operation that took place overnight in northern Syria. This ISIS leader was on the 3rd floor of this safe house, they say, when he exploded this bomb, killing himself, members of his family, including women and children. Notably, U.S. officials tell us that none of the American Special Operations Forces were harmed in this operation. However, there was one tense moment in particular when one of the military helicopters on the ground there was dealing with a maintenance issue, and ultimately they had to blow it up to make sure that none of that military hardware got into the hands of any of the individuals on the ground there. We were told by officials, or we should say by folks on the ground, neighbors, that there was a U.S. military translator who for approaching an hour was using a loudspeaker to try to get those civilian individuals out of the House. And here is the President of the United States.
Yeah, let's listen.
Last night, operating on my orders, the United States military forces successfully removed a major terrorist threat to the world, the global leader of ISIS, known as Haji Abdullah. He took over as leader of ISIS in 2019 after the United States counterterrorism operation killed al-Baghdadi. Since then, ISIS has directed terrorist operations targeting Americans, our allies and our partners, and countless civilians in the Middle East, Africa, and in South Asia. Haji Abdullah oversaw the spread of ISIS-affiliated terrorist groups around the world after savaging communities and murdering innocents. He was responsible for the recent brutal attack on a prison in northeast Syria holding ISIS fighters, which was swiftly addressed by our brave partners in the Syrian Democratic Forces. He was the driving force behind the genocide of the Yazidi people in northwestern Iraq in 2014. We all remember the gut-wrenching stories, mass slaughters that wiped out entire villages, thousands of women and young girls sold into slavery, rape used as a weapon of war. And thanks to the bravery of our troops, this horrible terrorist leader is no more. Our forces carried out the operation with their signature preparation and precision, and I directed the Department of Defense to take every precaution possible to minimize civilian casualties. Knowing that this terrorist had chosen to surround himself with families, including children, we made a choice to pursue a special forces raid at a much greater risk than to our own people, rather than targeting him with an airstrike. We made this choice to minimize civilian casualties. Our team is still compiling the report, but we do know that as our troops approach to capture the terrorist, in a final act of desperate cowardness, he, with no regard to the lives of his own family or others in the building, he chose to blow himself up, not just to the vest, but to blow up that 3rd floor, rather than face justice for the crimes he has committed, taking several members of his family with him, just as his predecessor did. I'm grateful for the immense courage and skill and determination of our U.S. forces, who skillfully executed this incredibly challenging mission. The members of our military are the solid steel backbone of this nation, ready to fly into danger at a moment's notice to keep our country and the American people safe, as well as our allies. And I'm also grateful to the families of our service members. You served right alongside these soldiers and sailors, Marines, Special Forces, the loved ones, giving them the strength and support they need to do what they do. To our service members and their families, we're forever grateful for what you do for us, and we owe you a debt. Thank you. We're also aided by the essential partnership of the Syrian Democratic Forces. I want to commend our dedicated intelligence community, the Department of Defense, and members of our national security team throughout the government, whose meticulous and tireless work over the course of many months ensured that this mission succeeded. This operation is testament to America's reach and capability to take out terrorist threats no matter where they try to hide anywhere in the world. I'm determined to protect the American people from terrorist threats, and I'll take decisive action to protect this country. And we'll continue working with our close allies and partners, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Iraqi security forces, including the Kurdish Peshmerga, and more than 80 members of the global coalition to keep pressure on ISIS to protect our homeland. We remain vigilant. We remain prepared. Last night's operation took a major terrorist leader off the battlefield, and it sent a strong message to terrorists around the world. We will come after you and find you. Once again, today, we continue our unceasing effort to keep the American people safe and to strengthen the security of our allies and partners around the world. I want to thank you all, and may God bless you, and may God protect our troops. I'm heading off to New York right now. I'm late, and thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
President Biden at the White House announcing the death and the killing of what he called a major terrorist leader known as Haji Abdullah, the #1 in command of ISIS, and described a daring raid by 24 of our special forces overnight in northwest Syria in Idlib province. And we're starting to get more information now on how this attack unfolded. It was months in the making. Let's turn to our Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kuby, who has got the latest on this. Courtney, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, it was months in the making, as you mentioned, Savannah. And then on Tuesday morning in an Oval Office meeting, President Biden gave the final go-ahead when the U.S. military, Secretary Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, gave him the assurances that they believed that this is where Qurayshi was. The U.S. special operators, they landed outside in a perimeter area around this building in helicopters, and then they proceeded on foot, got to the building. They called out, telling people to come out of the building. Some civilians did, but as we now know, that ISIS leader, he detonated himself on the 3rd floor of that building, killing himself and women and children who were also present, and essentially destroying the building in the process. The U.S. military was on site for about 2 hours before they left. During the course of this, one of the helicopters experienced a maintenance issue and had to be detonated on site when it was deemed unsafe to fly. The Pentagon calling this a successful operation, Savannah.
All right, Courtney, and I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent at NBC's Richard Engel, who happens to be in Ukraine right now, another global hotspot. But Richard, your thoughts on the significance of the killing of this terrorist? It certainly bears some hallmarks to al-Baghdadi, his predecessor, and the way U.S. officials are describing it, very much a similar action at the end where he blew himself up, having taken some family members and other civilians with him.
A lot of similarities, Savannah. It was only about 15 miles away from where Baghdadi was killed. This time, the operation took place in a small Syrian village. I've been to the village before, and we were able to contact the owner of the building. He told us that the 3rd floor was rented out, he thought, to a widow and her family. We also spoke to a neighbor, and he said that right around 1 o'clock in the morning local time, he heard the helicopters come in. Then a few minutes later, he heard an Arabic speaker in an Iraqi accent calling out, pleading for people to come out of the building, say there's no hope, you're surrounded, give yourselves up, save yourselves. At about half an hour into this, there was a small exchange of fire with what he thought were AK-47 rounds and pistol rounds. Then there was another attempt to get the women and children and men out of the building, but that in the end, Baghdadi blew himself, the ISIS leader blew himself up.
All right, Richard, thank you very much. So again, with the breaking news just out this morning, the leader of ISIS has been killed in Syria, part of a special forces operation on the ground in northwest Syria. His name, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi, but is known as Haji Abdullah. The president called him, quote, a horrible terrorist leader who, among other things, was, quote, the driving force of the massacre of the Yazidi people in Iraq in 2014. We will continue to follow this story as we look at those images of the aftermath. We have more on MSNBC, NBC News Now, and NBCNews.com. Most of you will now return to the Today Show. I'm Savannah Guthrie in New York. This has been an NBC News Special Report.